So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our final session in our series dedicated to sourcing and material innovation in celebration of the launch of CFDA.com Materials Hub, which was created in partnership with UGG. The Materials Hub is now live on CFDA.com under the resources and tools area of the website. So please go check it out. Not right now, wait until this panel is done. My name is Tara St. James. I am the founder of Resourced, which is a consultancy to help create sustainable change in the fashion industry through more responsible material sourcing and production. I'm very happy to moderate this discussion on behalf of the CFDA, particularly happy to be focused on packaging, which I believe to be often overlooked by brands as a potential resource for sustainability strategies and initiatives. And we're specifically going to focus on how packaging is not just a material or an object or something to be discarded, but how it's part of a greater system of adapting sustainability strategy. So today we're speaking with some incredible leaders across packaging innovation around the world. As a reminder, our chat today is pre-recorded, so don't try to put in any questions, but we will follow up with contact information for all of our speakers. So if you want to reach out to them directly with questions, you'll have access to be able to do that after the session. This session will be uploaded on CFDA.com and the CFDA's YouTube channel as well after this webinar concludes. So let's get to first, the format of this presentation is going to be brief presentations by each of our panelists, and then we're going to have a Q&A session with everyone together. So I'm going to get started by having the panelists introduce themselves briefly and share their screens with a presentation on their companies. And we're going to start with Saloni Doshi from EcoEnclose in the United States. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Saloni. Give me 1 second to share my screen here. All right. Good. All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Saloni Doshi. I'm the owner, CEO, and the chief eco geek at EcoEnclose. And thank you guys so much for having me here. It's an honor to be here and to be speaking alongside this incredible group of people. So thank you. So EcoEnclose is a leading provider of eco-friendly shipping supplies. So we really focus on shipping. So if you're a company that's really thinking, okay, how do I ensure that my supply chain is ethical, that I'm sourcing thoughtful materials, that I'm operating my company in a sustainable way, you really want to make sure you're shipping to your customers in a way that's also thoughtful. And hopefully that's where we come in and we can be really a solution there. And I always sort of start a conversation around EcoEnclose and packaging with this question of like, what is sustainable packaging? And my first response to that question when people ask me is like, there's really no such thing as sustainable packaging today, right? All packaging is inherently not net positive for the planet, it's net negative. Each package that is delivered is a draw on resources, not a regeneration of resources just yet. We're working to it. So let's make sure we all understand that. And then we answer the question of like, what is sustainable packaging is actually like, what makes some packaging more sustainable, more eco-friendly, better than traditional alternatives? And that's how I like to reframe that question. And then I always say like, there's no one perfect way to do sustainable packaging or eco-friendly packaging. We work with so many different companies, and they range from like one-person shops that are selling a couple orders a week to a million, household name brands that are doing millions upon millions of packaging a year. And they all like have different ways that they attack this problem of eco-friendly packaging. And I think this is an example on the slide of like between bubble mailers and boxes and paper mailers. All of these options are, to me, examples of sustainable packaging, even though they look different. And so this quandary sort of led us a couple of years ago to think, we can't do this work. We can't just slap the word sustainable on things unless we understand what it means to us. And that led us a couple of years ago to build, for us, a vision. What is our vision and framework for sustainable packaging? And that has become the sort of underlying foundation to everything that we at EcoEnclose do. And what we created was a vision around two things. One is circularity, and then the second is regeneration. And so I think this visual does a really nice job, I think, sort of showcasing what we mean by circularity. And so my vision 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now is this idea that every package that a consumer gets gets ideally recycled. And I don't mean recycling in the way recycling happens today, where things get recycled maybe 1 or 2 times and downcycled. I mean truly recycled, where it gets recycled back into itself many, many, many times. And it sort of goes through this loop where it goes to the recycler, the reclaimer buys it, sells it to a converter, sells it to a brand, and that just goes back and over again. And ideally those packages are reused many times first. And it's happening again multiple times before it gets kicked out to a landfill, a waste to energy, or a composting facility, depending on the material that it is. And then I also envision a world where all of the virgin inputs that are going into this, right now, they're red. I'm saying they're red because most virgin inputs going into a circular or into a supply chain are net negative. But I'm envisioning a world where the virgin inputs that go into a circular economy are net positive, that are truly regenerative, or at least net neutral to the planet. And again, we're not there today. This is a vision that is really far removed from where we are today. But this is the vision. And so for us, it helped us create a framework of like, how can every decision we make about the packaging that we offer and the ways that we improve that packaging every single year are in service to this ultimate vision. And so for us, it really boils down to a couple of things. I think first and foremost, we really maximize recycled content and post-consumer waste in particular, because when we are pushing post-consumer waste into our packaging, we're helping creating a market for post-consumer waste that then has like the recycler, the reclaimer, the brands, everybody's then making investments into their technology and their capabilities to be able to use more consumer waste and do more with it, which will just make recycling more true to the vision that we have, which is true endless recycling. And we also focus on recyclability. Everything that we offer is recyclable, and we do a lot of education and efforts to maximize recycling rates across there. We talk a lot about reusability, and we have features in our packaging that allow for reusability, and we see reusable packaging as a big part of our future. And then we also do a lot with source reduction, so offering as many sizes and customization options so people can really right size their packaging and ensure that they're using as little source material as possible. We think about our inks and our adhesives and all of those things, and how do they build again towards this ultimate sort of vision of circular packaging. So that's EcoEnclose.
Thank you, Saloni. And I want to take this moment to recommend that everyone follow your newsletter, because the EcoEnclose newsletter is fantastic and a great resource for me, not just about their materials and products, but also about sustainability initiatives in general. So I'm gonna plug it, but I'll do that for all of you, I promise.
Thanks, Tara.
Of course. So Michael, we're moving on to you. So Michael Waas from Tipa.
Let me just come off mute and share my screen. All right, you should be able to see it now. Yeah, fantastic. So Tipa is a company focused on helping transition packaging into being something you can be proud of by making it, turning it from waste into something else. And I think one of the things as we're looking at packaging specifically for the fashion industry is that there is a lot of new product developed every year, and that's built into the business model of fashion. And I think though there has recently been a shift away from fast fashion, the reality is that there is a tremendous amount of new material being developed every year. And when those products are being sent out, it's necessary to protect them. And so I think that, there we go. It's necessary to protect them. And I think that's one of the things, it's easy to focus on packaging as, unnecessary, but the reality is that it serves a purpose. And if it didn't, companies would have gotten rid of it because long before, not because of sustainability reasons, but because of cost reasons. Packaging is a cost. So sorry, I don't know what's going on with my computer here. So there is a real need for the packaging, and the challenge is that then it ends up in landfill, and particularly for flexible packaging, the polybags and mailers that are prevalent across the industry, there is historically very little recycling actually happening. And that is for a variety of reasons, but the reality is after all of the decades of the total production of plastic, we've recycled less than 10% of it. And flexible films in particular are really challenging for a couple of reasons. Some of that relates to the collection. They're difficult to collect in bulk. Some of that relates to the production and the recycling. It's tough to sort them out, and they can gum up the recycling equipment. But flexible films in particular are really challenging. And so most of that ends up going into landfill or incineration. And it's something consumers have noticed. That's why we're having this conversation. But I think what's really interesting is that because consumers are focused on sustainability, and in particular packaging sustainability, they've also indicated they're willing to pay more for it. And so that opens up some conversations around how to make a more sustainable shift. And the reality is that there's not just a cost comparison when you're looking at more sustainable materials. There's also real upside in consumer engagement and communication opportunities that result from making a more sustainable shift, in addition to the simple fact that it's the right thing to do for the planet, right? It's also important for it to be the right thing to do for a business. And so Tipa is focused on creating a compostable solution. And so if you look at the trajectory, moving from landfill to recycling, where some materials are collected and diverted from the waste stream, but often end up in the waste stream anyways, compostable products offer an alternative that can be truly circular, where they go back into the ground and become part of a natural compost. And so that's Tipa's inspiration, is the orange peel, is nature's packaging, because for the entirety of the natural world, there was no waste. And so because we have that example, there's no reason we can't go back to it. And so that is what Tipa is focused on, is creating high performance, fully compostable products. And that's a challenge, because often when people think about moving to a more eco-friendly, a more sustainable solution, particularly with packaging, they often think they have to give up performance, that it won't look as good or it won't feel as good. And the reality is that you can create high performance materials that provide the same protection, the same consumer experience, but also provide a more sustainable end of life. And that's so important for a fashion company, because the packaging is the first thing your consumer sees when they buy your product. Before they get to experience the product or wear it, they also they have to open up the package. And so there's a chance to pivot that customer experience into something that is more elevated and more inspiring than traditional plastic. So that's Tipa.
Thank you, Michael. And I especially love how you're able to really engage customers, and I think this is true for all of you, into the conversation about responsibility with their packaging, and then have brands integrate with that. So I'm going to pass it on to Flavien Chaussegros, who is joining us from Hong Kong, and it's very late at night, from the Invisible Company. Flavien, take it away.
I'm going to share the screen.
No luck. So
okay, can you, maybe you would have to take the lead of the presentation, and I would let you know how to skip quickly on every slide.
No problem. Just give me 1 second. I will load it up and share. And then in the meantime, maybe you can introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, so I was saying that I'm Flavien, the co-founder of Invisible Company, a company that we created about a year and a half ago out of a simple question: when we saw so much trash in the nature, what could we do as an individual level? And so maybe the next slide, please. We're going to share to you quickly the journey of our company that started officially 18 months ago with the setup. And then in about May time last year, we launched the Invisible Bag, which is an alternative solution to the conventional plastic that you find, as you said before, in the fashion industry or in the logistic industry or in a lot of protective side of the packaging products. Within a period of time, a year and a half, we've been able to connect with over 250 clients, divert about 1 million bags from the traditional plastic to Invisible Bag. And we are now focusing for the future into another research and development that will be towards food and packaging. But let me explain to you a bit more detail what is our product. Next slide, please. Can I get to the, okay. So invisible bag, in a long story short, this is a material that had been engineered about 100 years ago by 2 German scientists. And that material is a synthetic water-soluble polymer that has the property of being water-soluble, compostable, and biodegradable. It's been seen to many of us without having a very straightforward thinking that this is something that is useful for plastic, but everybody got pills. Unfortunately, when you got sick, and the coating of the pill is made with the same material we use for invisible bag, the laundry pod that we use, the embroidery, the contact lens, and the glue that we see in different area have been there in a common, like we say, in the market for 30, 40 years, until basically we put our hands on this idea to figure out that they are able to make so many different industrial products, such as the coating or such as the laundry pod. So we should divert this usage to fast fashion or to consumerism product in order to bring an alternative. Can I get to the next slide? Okay, so what we do believe this is a solution. As I explained earlier, this is a compostable material that fits the standard European or American. This is landfill biodegradable, which is something that most of the other compostable or recyclable material you could find on the market are not. Our invisible bag, within 3 months, they would degrade between 80 to 95%, depending on the landfill conditions, which give another chance to the material to disappear. So which the DNA of the material would be out and cut it for the afterlife. This is environmentally safe. This is proven to be plastic free. This is proven to be non-toxic. This is proven to be, I would say, safe for the environment in case there is a leak in the environment. And we also use eco-friendly ink. Can I get to the next slide? Why we do believe that this is a solution for the consumer? Most of the time, when you buy some packaging out of a product, the traditional method will be like either recycle, if you have the chance to recycle, and if there is a circuit of recycling in your facilities around yourself, otherwise you will go to the landfill. So it's pretty linear. Now, if someone received invisible bag with his t-shirt when he purchased online, that comes as well on the mailer for invisible bag, few choices happen. It can be composted, it can be dissolved. By putting the bag in 80-degree water, it would go directly into a liquid form, and a liquid form can be sent to the sewage plantation where it will be treated, filtered, and combined with the microorganism, go back to carbon dioxide and water. And worst case worst, which is not really what we want, but this is, as Michael said earlier, a lot of polymailer or a lot of polybag would end on a landfill. Even on a landfill, there is a chance for the polybag to degrade. Next slide, please. That one will be very straightforward, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the different solution in the market, where it goes to plastic bag, when it goes to PLA, when it goes to paper bag. Here, this is a snapshot of what invisible bag is in terms of price or in terms of material specificity. So we are basically a bit more expensive, but we have different attributes. And this is where we believe that the premium that people are paying for is something that is a choice for the consumer now, and is not anymore like a constraint of doing. Can I get to the next slide? Okay. Why did we choose invisible bag and invisible company? Just because we want to make a positive impact. Replacing a single plastic bag using the invisible bag is a chance that a consumer can make by dissolving it, composting it, or trying to dispose on its own way instead of being to the environment. We have 250 small client to medium clients based in Hong Kong or based in worldwide. So this is the word that each of us can make an impact day by day. Next slide, please. As I said, make an impact and buy small to make a big impact. A lot of our clients started buying with 200 pieces or even sometimes 50 pieces or even just a couple of 100 pieces in order to be sure that they are also taking the word of their sustainability into action by having an invisible bag and making invisible bag basically a catalyst of communication for themselves as well. Can I go to the next slide? Here, this is a quick example of our community. This is very important for Invisible Company to put in advance the community, because with that community, we are capable to create an action. And that action is very significant when the word goes into the brand, the consumer, and the manufacturer. This is all streamlined with the idea that all of us can do something together. The next slide. What do we offer to brands, to manufacturers or to consumer is a choice of bag that they can also customize. They can do their own mailer, they can do their own polybag, they can do their own shopping bag, and this is something that would fit different type of businesses and different type of, I would say, countries' regulation. Next slide. This is an example of what we've done for a luxury retailer in Hong Kong, where they did customize the shopping bag and they replaced all the plastic bag in their shop. The next slide, I think, is something that we're going to show you from a brand that is based in Colombia. True is an emerging fashion brand that is very high, very funky. They replaced their poly bag, their mailer bag, and the shopping bag using invisible bag for all their operation within Colombia. So it means that our product goes into a possible action and possible, we say, development for a brand as well. Next slide. Okay, here, this is a quick snapshot of where we've been seeing invisible bag, where we had client purchasing invisible bag, and how basically invisible bag is taking action into other countries. Next slide. We also want to do something which is back to the nature. So that's why we partner up with NGO that act towards the education of the environment. And we have a percentage of our profit that is given back to this NGO, the Animal Farm, as well as also we do a lot of eye cleaning and beach cleaning in Hong Kong, where we believe it's important to also contribute on that perspective to show the danger of the plastic and how human being can do something towards it. Next slide. I think is the end. Okay, here are this is the couple of information I've been able to share quickly, and thank you, Tara, for your help.
Thanks, Flavien. We'll be sharing everyone's contact information as well, so that's why I didn't mind to take down that screen quickly, but we will be putting that at the end as well. So last but not least, Neda, and I'm going to share for you as well. So just give me one moment.
Thank you so much.
And yes, I think you can see that, so I will let you take it away.
Thank you. So I'm Neda I'm the Global Brand and Marketing Director for Archhook. And Archhook, if I can, yeah, if you could just go back, just a couple slides back, if it's possible. Super, thank you so much. Thank you for the help. I was a little technologically challenged, so I appreciate your support. So Archhook is a sustainable materials engineering company. We develop recycled and recyclable alternatives to non-sustainable materials within fashion and retail. If I could ask you to switch to the next slide. So while we're a global company today, we were founded in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, in 2015. And we started out as the world's first sustainable hanger brand. At the time, the company believed that the often neglected and very humble item and commodity that the hanger is could actually be sustainable from both an ecological and an economic point of view, as well as start a necessary and urgent conversation around renewable resources in fashion and retail. I'm not sure how much any of you or our listeners are aware, but essentially plastic hangers, in fact, pose a bigger waste and environmental challenge than you might think. Generally, they're produced and delivered on a massive scale. There's an estimated 150 billion hangers a year, the majority of which are low-grade single-use plastic hangers made of plastic types such as polystyrene. Which is basically non-recyclable, very cheap and very fragile plastic. Approximately 85% of these plastic hangers actually end up in landfills after not having been used for more than something like 3 months. So this led to the need for Archhook as a company, transforming the sustainable hanger field, but also the inception of Archhook Blue, which was one of our material innovation plastic recycled material, which is cleaning up or preventing plastic from entering from the oceans, which essentially led us to the company that we are today, a company that focuses on sustainable material engineering for the entire category of goods not for resale, which includes things like packaging, transportation, hangers, but also the retail environment and design as a whole. But even more importantly, the expanded material and product engineering, which started off by solving the problem of hangers and developing this material innovation, it actually started a very necessary and urgent conversation around renewable resources in fashion and retail. If I could ask you then to switch back to the last slide. So you've heard it from all the lovely speakers so far. We are at a very exponential point in our development today, and we are facing a pretty serious environmental crisis unless we do something about it. We are facing very serious pollution, basically a pollution disaster being dominated by overproduced materials which have been discarded in exchange for seemingly low-priced virgin plastics pumped into the world at an exponential rate, basically with no thought for reuse or accountability and recycling which works. There are 300 million tons estimated plastic waste a year, which is about the weight of the entire human population, and it's only projected to grow bigger. So we really are looking at a one-directional use of plastics and just an ongoing global pile of waste, which is just being unresolved. So without minimizing plastic waste and maximizing product life, and without circularity and taking accountability for what we have already put out there, industries and, well, humanity as a whole will continue producing more single-use plastics with no consideration for the environmental impact. It's basically, a dark road ahead in a tunnel with no end. So we firmly believe that all the raw components that companies and industry need already exist. And by utilizing and supporting smart engineering solutions, it's basically entirely unnecessary to create any new plastics ever again. And this is where Archhook's mission comes in, to eliminate the use of unsustainable materials and virgin plastics and use sustainable materials only. We see waste as a material and innovation opportunity, and essentially an opportunity for innovative circular impact. So cleaning up what we have caused, taking that waste material and actually transforming it into more durable and more longer-term use products in a wide range of solutions and needs by fashion retail brands and retailers, and essentially, introducing it into a new fully recycling circular loop. So that's essentially what we're about.
Thank you, Neda. Thank you, everybody, for your presentation. So much diversity of product and conversation here. So I'm going to start with our questions. And the first question is for all of you, or any of you who would like to answer. So, originally when we came to the idea of this panel, the goal of it was, and the goal of the panel, but also of the packaging industry in general, is not to find one ideal packaging solution to fit all brands. As we know, sustainability there's no sustainability silver bullet or one size fits all solution, but rather it's important to understand how to evaluate landscape of solutions and assess which is best. So how do you individually help companies do this? Because I imagine you're getting a lot of questions from the customers you're working with as to how to navigate the landscape, and what do you feel is the best approach to make that assessment from the company level, and how do you help them do that? Anyone who wants to jump in.
I'd like to start with basically, I guess, for all the panelists today, we are facing the same concept of education towards the consumer. No solution is perfect, but the solution we've been presenting today, all of them propose an alternative for the consumer. It depends on their needs. If this is the need of protection, if it's the needs of short-term delivery, if it's the needs of bringing an alternative that the consumer will be part of. So I think this is where we have the biggest help to the consumers. Like 20 years ago, the information was not live. We didn't engage with the consumer on that level. And now people can go online, can browse, they can basically get documented. And when you have a lot of company trying to do something in the green sustainability area, you need company like the panelists today to, I would say, dig and make a due diligence to be sure, okay, guys, this is what we have for you. So now we can basically talk about what is your real need, because we have a solution. If we don't have the solution today in our portfolio, we know another company that can be there for you. And this is how we try to create that sustainable community. And instead of being, I would say, shooting bullets everywhere, we are making the alliance, and I've been introducing other company to our client because we couldn't deal with them with our current product. And I think this is how the sustainability works and help the small to medium businesses.
I have to say, oh, go ahead, Saloni.
No, I'll let you go first, Mike.
I was just going to say, I really agree. And I think we look at it not as having customers, but as having partners and in finding ways to help educate the customers, because the reality is that sustainability is a complicated topic. And even when it comes to end of life, it's really complicated. And so it's important to help educate all of the relevant stakeholders within our partners so that they understand, because often there's been the law of unintended consequences when it comes to packaging in particular, where, for 30 years, companies have been trying to lightweight their packaging because they wanted to save the greenhouse gas by using less material and, requiring less fuel to truck it around because the material weighed less. But then it creates a waste challenge because you have a more complicated, thinner material. And so I think it's important to approach this as a journey and look at solving the right problems with each of our partners.
Yeah, that was very beautifully said, Michael, just like the complexity of it. So I think many people come to, I think because we have a fairly diverse set of offerings, I think a lot of people come to us being like, help me choose, right? It's a very common question that we get from companies big and small. And I think you framed it really well. Like, the issues are complex. And what the first thing we encourage our companies to do is to create their actual own framework, because, it's easy to kind of be like, okay, maybe they're coming to us with an end of life. They're like, I just want to make sure that this doesn't contribute to plastic pollution. But you really have to unpack it and be like, okay, well, what's your philosophy on carbon emissions? What's your philosophy on the inputs that are going to go into your product, and what do you need from that? So I really sit down with folks a lot and say, let's create your framework. What are you passionate about? What issues is your company sort of focused on trying to solve? And then we create a framework. And I'm seeing that they seem to fall into different things. Some people are very focused on minimizing their carbon emissions. And I think this year, climate change, we've been talking about plastic waste for so long. And then this year, I think with the fires and the natural disasters, the conversation is coming back to climate change and carbon emissions more than ever. And so that's been interesting to see. Then some people are focused on I want to minimize anything that my company is doing to produce plastic waste pollution. That might be one framework. Other things I see is circularity and zero waste, et cetera. So there's 5 or 6 sort of frameworks that I see companies veering to, but I really encourage them to ask those the 5 whys to get to the framework that makes the most sense for their company. Once you have a framework, decisions start to become a lot easier. The complexity that, Michael, you're referring to, you as a company can get through all of that complexity because you've got a vision that you're working towards.
I mean, from my perspective, and I cannot agree more. It's actually quite exciting, or it's both good and bad that we're all aligned on this. In the sense that I completely recognize, and I believe that we view this problem in the same way. It's really about navigating our clients and partners through the challenges and how to introduce these solutions. What we find is a lot of internal or in-house challenges that our clients are facing as well. We conducted a research on hanger usage in the UK last year. And one of the most shocking things that we found out, for example, was that actually while about 80%, over 80% of the brands say the sustainability is top on their business agenda, only about 5 actually, and again, this is, fashion professionals within brands being interviewed, only about 5% of them could actually say what happens to their packaging or hangers in-house. So there's, for us, it's about, we're not selling a product, we're trying to sell change, and that is selling change for the clients and the brands themselves, and trying to understand how we can also help, as mentioned already, navigate the stakeholders through that change, and essentially help them map out their impact currently versus what their impact in the long run should be, and essentially, what the steps in between look like. So amazing that we're all on the same page.
That segues really well, both Saloni and Neda, into the next question I have, which was the most common questions you're getting from brands. But it sounds like brands are also coming to you, and I don't want to generalize, but correct me if I'm wrong here, brands are coming to you for guidance on sustainability strategy, and the education is sort of in your court to help guide them towards a direction. Are you seeing a little bit of a shift there with fully formed sustainability roadmaps on the brands becoming more and more common, or do you feel like there's still a ways to go at that level?
I think someone mentioned it, you know, the whys, the 5 whys. For us, again, it's around, a lot of it is around internal decision making. How are you know, our clients or the stakeholders within our client organizations getting to the point of switching to a sustainable solution? And for us, we sum it up into the 3 W's: what, when, and why. So, you know, why do I want to switch to this now, or when should I switch to this? Why do I need to make the change? And essentially, what is it that I need to do as a next step? What is the correct solution for me? What is the correct implementation plan? And you know, these are all around timing and traceability and conditioning. And there's such a variety of factors that, you know, our partners essentially need to take into account in that regard. On top of, you know, keeping track and fundamentally developing a plan that they can implement, you know, from external factors like legislation to the urgent need and consumer, you know, input and push. So for us, it's really been about understanding their internal challenges, and then kind of all of the questions and input has been around that.
Yeah. Neda, I couldn't agree more in how important it is to understand the internal dynamics, because what I've seen is that so many companies make bold claims or join the EMF or, you know, the new plastics economy. But then the reality of actually executing and shifting the organization becomes a real, the next challenge, because then it's, you know, how do you get the procurement team aligned with the sustainability team, aligned with the marketing team? There's a lot of different factors at play. And so it's so important to understand a holistic strategy. And to your question, Tara, I think, yes, there is absolutely fundamentally more thought happening at a systems level, but we're in a lot of ways at the beginning of that conversation. And so it's important to still navigate kind of challenge by challenge. And again, I mentioned this during the overview, but I think it's so important to also keep the business element of the conversation at the center, because fundamentally that's what's at the center of priorities for companies. And so the world's most ambitious sustainability agenda will move nowhere without a compelling business case. And so when you can marry those things within an organization, then you're really set to take off.
I do think the largest brands that we work with are doing sort of what, Michael, you're describing much better than they were, frankly, even 3 years ago. Like, okay, over the last week, we've had conversations with really large brands. One of them is committed to minimizing their carbon footprint above all else. One of them is focused on paper and curbside recyclability above all else. And then one of them is focused on, I'm trying to think of like how they would describe it, I guess more like the RPM, the responsible packaging movement. So moving into paper and regenerative sources into paper. And it's been interesting because when I get on the phone with them now, this wasn't true 3 years ago. When I get on the phone with them now, it's like the company that I'm thinking about that's moved to paper is like, okay, well, I've got 2 supply chains that are my test pilot supply chains for moving glassine into the mix as the polybag alternative. And these are my fulfillment centers and my manufacturing facilities that are willing to pilot this. And then if this goes well, here's the next step, here's the next step, and here's the numbers that I'm going to be testing and knowing if this is successful or not. And that has not, 3 years ago, it was like people were just throwing spaghetti at the wall. So I think at that larger brand level, you're seeing the level of thought and an understanding of how these decisions impact their entire supply chain. That said, how many companies out there like have a sustainability department? Very few. And so the conversation continues to be a struggle, I think, for small brands, for ones that are just starting. And in some ways it's easier because their supply chains might be less complex, but they don't have the pull and the resources to do it. So I think what will you try to do is help the small companies almost learn from the big companies, right? Take those lessons and give them to the emerging brands.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it does touch on a need for infrastructure, particularly, this is a global issue, but specifically in the United States, there's a requirement for a lot of infrastructure that perhaps is not entirely robust enough to accommodate some of the end of life needs that we have for some of these packaging. So how are you working with customers to set up this infrastructure? And this is, I mean, for any of you, although I want to be conscious of time, but what is really missing as far as infrastructure for end of life solutions for a lot of the packaging that you're dealing with and selling?
So I think there are lots of infrastructure challenges when it comes to end of life across the board, evidenced by the fact that a very small percentage of recyclable materials actually get recycled already. And so there's just, that system is very porous. And so there's, a lot of work to be done there. And on the same note, for compostables, it's really important to be building out the network of compost facilities and making sure people have access to them. And so it's a compostable packaging company. You can imagine Tipa follows those developments pretty closely. And there's been an enormous increase in the focus on increasing access to compost, because increasing compost has a direct result in decreasing carbon footprint, because diverting organic waste from landfill to compost cuts methane emissions. And so there is a compelling environmental case, even aside from the waste management component. Just the carbon reduction is really important. And so we're at, I think, towards the beginning of that conversation, and expect to see a significant increase in access to compost specifically, but that is a larger challenge, making sure that there is an end-of-life infrastructure for everything.
And requires a level of education for both brands and consumers, I imagine, right? Yeah. I want to pivot for a little bit. Saloni, you mentioned circularity in your presentation, and now that returns are on the rise and resale is becoming more and more popular, which I'm really glad to see. I know EcoEnclose has been addressing this for years with your resealable bags and other products, but where do you see the future of reverse logistics and circular packaging solutions going?
I can talk about this forever. I love the questions around reusable packaging, because I think they actually force us to get under the covers almost of sustainable packaging. So just go like this if I'm talking too much. So I think reusable, or I would say first what EcoEnclose has been doing, we've been focusing on having a reseal strip on most of our packaging. And the reason for that is if 30% of e-commerce purchases are returned, this at least becomes a vehicle for the return. That's great. It's a small step in the right direction. The trend, or there's an emerging sort of conversation around this idea of woven bags, or sort of like a grocery tote that you're used to seeing, that material being repurposed into reusable packaging, right? That when the customer gets it, they then either return their item in it or they send it back to the fulfillment center to reuse again. And I think it's one of those things, again, oh, at first blush, this isn't obvious. Why aren't we all doing this? This is so clearly obvious and more circular. And so as we starting to move EcoEnclose, should we address this and start offering this? It's helped us uncover a lot of, I think, the questions or the issues to consider. And Fashion for Good has done a lot of great research in this space. If you haven't seen the research, I would encourage you guys to check it out. But I think when you start to go under the covers, the issues that come up are things like, okay, what is the recycled content that's going into those woven bags? What is the end of life of those woven bags? How far do they have to travel to get back to the fulfillment center? And then what is the rate that customers are actually returning those bags? And what the research is showing is that if you're comparing it to 100% recycled polymailer, which is what we offer, and if you then have a 30x heavier reusable woven bag, that bag actually, especially if it's not recyclable, that bag has to be returned 95% of the time or more in order to create less waste and have a much a lower carbon footprint than the polymailer alternative. And I think it's just when you break it down that way, you realize we have some distance to go before reusability is where the future is. So what EcoEnclose is looking at is getting maximum, 100% recycled content into reusable bags, having them be recyclable, making sure that they're a clear option for brands that where returns are just part of the business model, right? Like a Stitch Fix type of model should do that pretty quickly. And then figuring out how can we track, encourage, and maximize returns to make this a truly viable, like a better waste and carbon footprint alternative. And I think we're going to get there. We're just not there today. It's not the right solution today for most brands.
Great. Did anyone else want to jump in? If not, I'm gonna. This question is for Flavien in particular, but for all of you, because what I've noticed recently in the last couple of years is that packaging and other services and items in the typical fashion supply chain historically have been very much operating under the radar. So they have very little visibility to the customer side. And what I mean by that is branding doesn't usually transfer over. And Flavien in particular, with your presentation, we saw that the name of your company is very prominently displayed on a lot of your packaging. You mentioned that that's optional. But I've noticed a trend lately where vendors like yourselves are becoming brands themselves and accessing, maybe skipping a step of dealing with through brands and communicating directly with the end customer by communicating information, by creating brand loyalty. How important is this on your end? We'll start with you, Flavien, but anyone's welcome to jump in. Because you have a strong presence, you have a strong social media presence, you interact directly with customers, and this was a conscious choice on your part when you launched the company, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, in reality, it wasn't the first idea when we launched, but it turns out that we launched, and at the same time, COVID just put the world on breakdown. So we were like, our plan of targeting big corporation and trying to propose that solution to a larger scale of companies, so then it turned to be like no option, no possibility. So we were like stuck in Hong Kong. We couldn't go out, we couldn't do much stuff. So we were like, we need to reshuffle our business strategy. And this is where we realized that be a corporation, in a way, if they want to press play, they have a sustainable team, they have a lot of resources in order to make it happen. But the shop on the corner or the small secondhand shop that is doing, I would say, his work online and trying to get exposure, they have no choice on getting alternative solution packaging. So we decided to focus on these people to make sure that they have access to what we do with Invisible Bag. But then we thought that it was not enough to just providing them a packaging. We need to educate them, we need to educate the consumer, and we need to make sure that on top of having a water-soluble, compostable, and biodegradable solution, they also have an exposure by using Invisible Bag that would make a leverage to the market, but also their own user, our own community. So I would say that creating that engagement with brands and creating the engagement of the brands with their end user has been the backbone of our current business, because it creates an experience. When a consumer receives Invisible Bag and dissolve it in water and put that on the hashtag Invisible Bag on Instagram, I mean, it's creating a lot of algorithm that people would see it. And so it creates the awareness that all of us today are looking at. So that's something we decided to go on that direction, proposing customization for your name, for example, but also Invisible Bag in a way that we take the responsibility of promoting the packaging, so you can focus on what is your core business. Sell your product, promote what is your product, because people, they don't care about the packaging. They just buy your product, but they are happy to know the packaging is Invisible Bag, or it's like EcoEnclose, or it's a packaging that have been thoughtful thinking.
Very interesting to hear, Flavien. I think we're quite aligned on that as well. And we see this also as an opportunity for the brands. When Archhook was launched originally as a hanger company, we didn't see ourselves as a supplier. We saw ourselves as a hanger brand. The idea was that our partners and clients can see essentially everything around their products as part of their brand, as part of the consumer experience. Why cannot packaging be part of the, and we know that there are a lot of brands that do this very successfully, but why can't that be part of the consumer experience? Or, a hanger, you can communicate so much through that, but you can also showcase a lot of your commitments as a brand through that. And that includes sustainability, both from a marketing and brand perspective, but also from accountability perspective. If you want to be truly sustainable and you want to have a holistic brand, do it from A to Z. Otherwise, it's just you're not doing it right.
I agree with you. We used to say that sustainability is personal choice first. You do it at home, you do it with your kids, do it with your family, and then you go back to the office and this is where you do it. And depending on your job, if your job is fashion, then you would towards the sustainability. So it's like holistic. You have to think. I always say to your company, they have to think like a cop. They have to think of the concept, they have to think of the operation, and they have to think of the price. If they go through those three elements, sustainability is possible just by your personal choice.
Michael, Saloni, did either of you want to jump in here? Because you do have a lot of contact, but feel free to say no.
I don't think I can say it better than you guys already did. I'm well said. It's just, it's cool that the world is going in this Intel Inside direction for packaging. So I think it benefits consumers a lot.
Well, so that actually is a perfect segue to our final question for everyone is, and I want to throw a little curveball at you. So the question is, where do you see the future of packaging as a system and how can it change the industry? So that's the bigger question. But also second to that is if you had a magic wand right now and you could wave it and apply a solution to a problem that you're facing or one of your brands is facing, what would it be? Anyone can go first.
I believe the future of packaging is going in innovative education material. Because out of these three words, we can create a lot of content, we can create a lot of possible action towards packaging, and we can't stop where we are. I mean, sustainability is just at the baby step. So we need to keep innovating and we need to keep giving the word like a propaganda to let people know that we here, there is a team of soldiers or like generals that are here to make a change. And so let us do the change and tell the big company that I would say, because it seems that a lot of us are able to work with small corporation, but we should let a big corporation aware that they should help us, because if they give us a chance at one point to get into a pilot test or to get inside of a project with them, it would give us the fuel to carry on the innovation and bring them alternative solutions that they're looking for that we don't even know exist.
I think I probably in my presentation sort of talked about my dream for the future, which is like endless circularity. There's really cool technology happening right now as I think about what can the inputs be into a sort of endlessly circular loop of packaging, which is like so beautiful, I think, is a dream. But what if we had virgin inputs? There's, like I said, cool technology that's sequestering carbon from carbon emitting industries and turning it into packaging. And that is like in things like that, where like can packaging help become a sequesterer of carbon? And then if that packaging lives forever in a circular loop, that's an interesting dream where packaging can actually help to reverse the impact of climate change and carbon emissions. And I think that some of the technology to achieve a dream like that is starting to emerge and is existing. So that's one, there's many dreams, but that's one sort of avenue that I could see the world going, which is really exciting.
That is a world I'd love to live in, Saloni. It's interesting. I think I agree. There's so much new technology, and there isn't going to be a single solution because there are so many different kinds of packaging. So it's important to continue finding new solutions. And as we're doing that, to keep in mind how the packaging gets used, because ultimately, if it's not convenient, if it doesn't work for people, if it doesn't work for the application, nobody's going to use it, right? The best packaging is no packaging or durable, reusable packaging, but it's so far from the consumer experience, from what we need in our daily lives, that it's, that's only one solution. So I think that's the question, is balancing the actual use and the consumer experience with all of the new technology, all the new opportunities to move in a more sustainable direction. And I think it's exciting to see the focus on it, because that's what moves companies and innovators to create solutions. And there really is a compelling need right now.
I hope we all have the magic wands, and if my magic wand could add on to your wishes, I would actually go what might seem to be a bit of a drier way, but actually in the direction of cross-sector collaboration. What we're finding problematic at the moment is that widespread adoption of eco-conscious policies is of fundamental importance if we want to achieve change, a holistic change. like both the private and the public sector need to be united in the strategy and these objectives. Otherwise, everything that we do is going to remain quite marginal. You know, we need to have transparency, we need to have accountability on pressure points, on regulations, on things like taxation, and kind of only working together across both sectors, we'll be able to really have the impact and the alignment that we need. Otherwise, we're all going to be working on our own thing at the same time. And I think for our viewers, you know, essentially, hopefully we have been able to reiterate with the huge impact that, you know, packaging is a big part of what of the world of fashion and retail. It's especially in the direction of which the industry is going. I think there were some statistics in the beginning, but we're talking about huge volume and an immense environmental impact and opportunity. So I think almost over 40% of all the waste in the world is from packaging. So there is an opportunity for huge impact, but there's also the urgent need for change. And, you know, we cannot only, you know, we need to be aware of not only the innovations that we're introducing and you know, moving in the direction of better products and better packaging solutions, but also be aware of our impact and what is currently happening in the world and how we can essentially be accountable for that and move forward to a better, more circular and more responsible future.
Thank you, Neda, and thank you all of you. If I had magic wands, I would hand them to all four of you in a moment. But in the interim, I'm grateful to have people like you operating in this space, elevating packaging from something that people discard to something that is really the first touch point and messaging of sustainability from brands to customers, because it's so all of the work that you're doing is really important. So that's all the time we have, unfortunately, and so I would like to extend a thank you to the CFDA for having hosting this panel series, as well as to all four of you for your time today and for all of the work that you do. So this particular one was recorded, and so you can watch it on repeat if you'd like. But I'd like to thank everyone again and wish you all a great day or night, depending on where you are. So get a good sleep or have a good afternoon, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Take
you,
care, everyone.
Thanks all.
Stay safe.
Sleep well.